Hi, my name's Melissa, and even though my life is pretty great, there's always been one big thing missing: my dad. For as long as I can remember, I've been asking my mum about him and secretly hoping he would just turn up on our doorstep and we'd live happily ever after. My mum is amazing, and she has always done everything to make our life as perfect as can be. But I just couldn't stop thinking about my dad out there in the world somewhere. When I was really young and my friends at school would ask about why I didn't have a dad, I'd say he was a superhero and had been called to fight crimes. And sometimes I'd even tell people he was an astronaut and was living on the moon. Every birthday I'd always make the same wish. I wish my dad would come home. But no matter how much I begged, my mum wouldn't ever let me meet him. I remember once when I was 6 years old, we went on vacation to the beach, and I convinced myself that that was where my dad lived. Every time a man passed us, I would ask him if he was my dad. It made my mum really upset, and she refused to take me to the beach again. But it's just not fair. Everyone else at school has a dad, and I don't see why I can't just meet him. If he's really that bad, then at least my mum can let me decide for myself. He's my dad, after all. So for years I would gaze extra long at every single male face we passed in the street, searching for any sign that one of them might be my dad. It started to affect my relationship with my mum. I think she became insecure about it all, thinking that maybe her love wasn't enough for me. I eventually told her I'd stop looking for him, and that I was sorry for bringing him up all the time. Things started to get better between us after that. Anyway, my mum is super healthy and fit, and really into running and yoga. But one day she had really bad stomach pains, and so we quickly rushed to the hospital. The doctors seemed quite worried, and thought it might be her appendix. We sat down in the waiting room to wait for the head doctor to give us the final results, and I went to the cafe to get Mum and I a bite to eat and some tea for Mum. When I came back with our food and tea, Mum looked so sad. I went straight to her and gave her a big hug and said everything will be okay. The head doctor eventually came out and he was chatting to another doctor as he walked towards us. Mum and I stood up and started walking towards them. As the doctors got closer, Mum suddenly stopped. She let out a little gasp, and as the doctors turned to face us, Mum dropped her tea all over her dress. The cup fell and rolled away, and I suddenly felt so embarrassed. Why was Mum suddenly so clumsy? The head doctor ran towards the reception to get a cloth, leaving the other doctor with us. He just stared at us, his eyes wide. It was so weird. Then he said, "Avril, is that you?" I turned to my mum and asked her why she knew this man. My mum burst into tears and walked towards the nearest seat. The doctor was staring at me a lot, and it looked like he had tears in his eyes. I panicked. Was my mum dying? I ran to my mum and asked her what's going on. That's when she told me, this doctor was my dad. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was hearing things. The next thing I knew, he was standing next to us crying and asking my mum if I was his baby. The head doctor and the nurses and receptionist were all watching from the side of the waiting room. This was the most surreal moment of my life. I'd been waiting for this moment for so long, and now it was here. I didn't even know how to act. Was I supposed to hug my dad? My mum looked even more shocked than me. She stopped crying and introduced us. She said, "Melissa, this is your father, Ben." I stuck up my hand to shake his, but I felt so awkward. I wanted to hug him, but he was a stranger. But also he was my dad. My dad. As his hand touched mine, he pulled me into his arms and said he'd been dreaming about finding me all this time, but didn't know whether I existed or not. I didn't understand what he meant. Of course I existed. But I just ignored that for now. All that mattered was that I had finally met my dad. The head doctor came over and told my mum they needed to run some more tests. So she hugged me and said she'd be back soon, and that now I could catch up with my dad. She said we'd talk about everything properly later, but for now I should just enjoy finally getting to spend time with my dad. I wish my mum luck, and Dad and I went off arm in arm to the cafe to get to know each other. This trip to the hospital turned out to be a lot more dramatic than I could ever have imagined.